Hello, humans. I received another question, and a challenging question it is. This person says, 1 Timothy 2:12, was Paul saying that women are not allowed to preach, or that he himself won't be preached to by a woman? Okay, so listen, I understand that this is a sensitive subject, and many people get extremely upset over this topic. And of the critics who desire to attack the Bible, one of their favorite complaints often used by them is that the Bible is sexist, it's misogynistic, it's anti-women. Whoa, but is that true? Listen, before I answer your specific question, we owe it to ourselves to zoom out and examine all of the evidence as to what the Bible as a whole teaches about women before we zoom in and examine this specific passage, okay? So what does the Bible as a whole teach about women? Well, we know that Genesis 1:26-27 tells us both male and female were created in the image of God. Galatians 3:28 tells us that both male and female are offered the same salvation. And we also read 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the entire chapter. It says both male and female have the same access to the same Spirit and the same spiritual gifts. Genesis 2:20-24 says the male was incomplete without female. The female completes the male. We also see in Exodus 2, verses 1-10, look, Moses was the leader of the Israelites, but he was a leader because of females. Yeah, Moses was supposed to have been thrown into the Nile River to drown, but a female placed him into a basket instead of throwing him into a river. Moreover, it was a female who saw him, a female nursed him, and a female raised him. There are multiple scriptures that attest to examples of females in ministry. The book of Joshua, the book of Hebrews lets us know a female rescued God's chosen people. Yeah, not only did a female rescue the Israelites and aided them into their victory, but she also ended up into the Hall of Faith. We also see that another female rescued God's chosen people. She has an entire book. Esther, you might know her. If you really want to see her glory moment, go to Esther 4:14. And we also see 1 Corinthians 11:12 says, we have males because of females, right? For as women came from man, also man is born of woman, but everything comes from God. Speaking of God, the Savior came from a female. Now, the female was the blessed vessel from whom the Savior Jesus came. And though the Virgin Mary was not the cause of the creation, all humans are now blessed because of her participation in this. In fact, the entire family tree, females played an important role. We have Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba. Jesus sprouted up through sin for the win. Look, Christ came through injustice and oppression to make his impression of justice. We see in the Gospels, females are loved just as much as males. And a female was the first witness to Jesus' resurrection. So, is the Bible sexist, misogynistic, or anti-women? No, absolutely not. Yet, many critics and even ignorant Christians often claim that the Bible teaches that women are made for man's glory and that women should be silent and never speak. Oh, but is that true? Not really. So, what does it mean in 1 Corinthians 11:7 when it says that the woman is the glory of man? Does it mean that men need trophy wives of physical perfection so that others know that we are alpha males? No. The word glory is the English translation of the Greek word doxa, which primarily signifies an opinion, estimate, and hence the honor resulting from a good opinion. But this is not to please men or receive praise from people due to a superficial status. No, look, just as Jesus reflects the Father and reveals who the Father is, man is supposed to reflect Christ and reveal who Christ is. Likewise, the woman is supposed to also represent the man and should also reflect who the man is. In essence, Paul in 1 Corinthians 11:7 is talking about reflecting the likeness of Christ in their designated functions as both male and female. Though males and females are equal in creation and salvation, they do have different functions and roles to play. Now, in the context of Genesis 2:21-23, Paul focuses on the temporal sequence of the creation of Adam and Eve. So the man was created first and reflects the glory of God. The woman was created second, becoming the glory of man in that she completed him. Now, this does not reduce the value of women. No, Paul is discussing here not the nature of males and females, but the relationship between a husband and his wife. Since the woman is, from man's perspective, bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, she shares the man's image of God status. In fact, only a few verses later in this same chapter, Paul specifically states, "However, in the Lord, neither is woman independent of man, nor is man independent of woman." Thus, husband and wife depend on each other and complete each other. Now, Paul argues that a woman, by the excellence of her being, also shows how excellent man is, since she was taken out of man from the beginning in order to help and complete man. Now, it is for this reason she was made from his side, not the head so as to rule over him, and not from the feet so he can trample over her. No, rather, she was made from his side because they are side by side equal in creation and salvation. Okay. But what about 1 Corinthians 14:34-35, which says that women are to keep silent? Okay, well, is Paul saying that women must always be silent? No. I mean, since Paul seems to permit wives to pray and prophesy, as long as they do not dishonor their husbands with the way they dress, it's difficult to see this as an absolute prohibition. Also, the book of Acts makes it known female prophets exist, and they did not remain silent. When Paul said that the women needed to remain silent, he was merely forbidding women to interrupt in order to ask questions. This is why he says that if they desire to learn anything, let them ask their own husbands at home. It is for this reason Paul concludes in 1 Corinthians 14, verse 40 by saying that all things must be done properly and in an orderly manner. Like, just chill, everybody. But it's also likely that Paul admonished them not to speak up and judge prophecies, being though this is the activity in the immediate context of 1 Corinthians 14:29, since such an activity would subvert male headship as God intended. God designated the male as the head of the relationship design, but this does not mean that women cannot be a part of ministry. Please, to understand this in greater detail, see my article that I published, Can a Woman Be a Pastor? Okay, now let's zoom in to the specific passage that you asked me about. So the context of 1 Timothy 2:11-12 is within the assembled church. So verse 11 states that the women should submit themselves and quietly receive instruction. But again, Paul is telling them not to interrupt. Don't be a disruption. But it's important to understand that women teaching other women and women teaching children are not in view here, and both are actually encouraged elsewhere, as we see. Nor does this passage have in view the role of women in leadership situations outside the church. I mean, after all, did not Priscilla, with her husband, teach Apollos a better understanding of the gospel message? Yeah, she did. And did not Paul acknowledge females as fellow workers in the Lord? Yep. Didn't Paul acknowledge Phoebe in the same introduction that he acknowledged Priscilla? Yeah. So in fact, Paul acknowledged that Timothy's faith came from his grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice. So why would Paul command that all women remain silent and never teach when he commended women for being fellow workers in the Lord who taught and prophesied? Thus, it is evident that those specific passages were for specific occasions. Women can most certainly be a part of ministry. Now, God's chosen design is that females are not to be senior or lead pastors who are heads over males, but they can most certainly teach the Bible and serve in many different capacities within the ministry. Again, please, to see this in greater detail, see my article, Can a Woman Be a Pastor? But in conclusion, look, clearly, the Bible is not anti-women. Whether you are male or female, you are loved. Jesus sacrificed himself to save you. Males and females are equally human in creation. They're equally important in value by redemption. However, males and females are different in roles because they do have different functions. Now, God specifically planned for the male, the husband, to be the head and authority over the female wife, just as Jesus is the head of the bride, the church. The male was appointed authority over female in function, but never considered over the female in value. No. And listen, by the way, submission to authority does not mean being entirely passive and agreeing with absolutely everything that the person in authority says or suggests. So a wife can certainly be subject to the authority of her husband and still participate fully in the decision-making process of the family. But because God appointed the male as the head position in function, only males can be senior or lead pastors. But again, this does not mean that women cannot fulfill their God-appointed functions in ministry. And this also does not mean that males are better than females. No, this simply means that God appointed males to be the lead pastors of his church, just as he appointed males to be the head of the family structure. And so, those specific passages were for specific occasions. They were not an absolute prohibition.